TEDx show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Tae Hae Nahm. How you doing today, Tae?
Very good, Ben. Looking really forward to being on your show here.
Well, I am so glad that you could carve out the time for this. I'm very appreciative because I really wanted to ask you, what is your story?
Sure. In my case, I was actually born in Korea, and we immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old. And then I went to college and wanted to be a programmer and go to business school. And my father, who was a medical school professor in Korea, wanted me to go be MD, PhD. And we compromised on law school. He felt I needed a professional degree. I didn't know anything about law at the time. I thought tort was something you ate. I didn't know it was a field of law. These Supreme Court cases like Brown versus School Board of Education, I had no idea what it was all about. I was a hardcore math major, math science major. And so law was like a learning a foreign language, but it was great. And then with that, I went to work with tech firms. I came out to Silicon Valley, and I've been here first working as a lawyer, working with several hundred startups, and then later on have been a VC for the last 20 years.
Wow. What really attracted you? Well, actually, let me step back even a little bit more. Um, when you moved at such a young age, how did that impact your identity? How did that change the game for you and impact your life?
Well, I would say the most direct impact was I almost flunked kindergarten because I'm starting school, but I can't speak the language. I didn't know any English, and so that had an impact. But overall, I would say really enjoyed growing up in St. Louis and learning how to be successful in St. Louis and in America.
Was it was it something that was difficult for you, picking up, a new language and kind of having ties to different cultures and um, really growing up like that? I mean, was that something where it was more of a struggle, or was that just an interesting extra flavor that you had growing up?
Well, I think, growing up, even if you grow up in your hometown that your family is for decades, I think the whole process of growing up means you have struggles. So I think, growing up by definition means you have struggles. And so since I didn't have context, like I hadn't grown up before, I didn't know whether the struggles were just tied to growing up or the fact that I'm an immigrant or all that, or just everything sort of meshed together. Um, so didn't really look at it that way. I guess the biggest difference is that growing up in St. Louis, I didn't know very many Koreans, so it was sort of insular amongst like my family and some family friends. And then going off to college and seeing so many Koreans actually was culture shock. I wasn't used to so many Koreans, and I would say one specific impact of that is that I didn't know that I was actually mispronouncing my own name until I was a senior in high school. And,
Wow.
and that's because in Korean culture, at least amongst the family, you rarely get called by your first name. I would get basically called as like second son or things like that because I have an older brother. So it would be all sort of positional. And so it was only when I was a senior in high school and I was talking to a high school friend of mine that was leaving a message, and then she goes, "That's not how you pronounce your name." So when he asked me how to pronounce my name, I just was thankful because I myself was mispronouncing my own.
Wow. What a story. What a story.
It is embarrassing, but that's part of growing up, and as you say, struggles in life.
Well, hey, I I'd love to share an embarrassing story with you too, because I have plenty of those. The the those little cheese things where it's wrapped in the red wax. You have to
Yes,
like take the
yes.
wax off. Okay, well, growing up, when I was in high school, I didn't know that the red was wax. I thought that was just another piece of the cheese.
Right.
so,
Me
so
too.
I was just
Yeah.
eating that for for a while.
Right.
And somebody saw me one time. They're like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm just eating this cheese." And they're like, "That's not the cheese." So I finally removed the wax, and then I tasted it. I was like, this cheese is actually not that bad. I
Right.
oh, the fun.
Uh,
So anyways, when you were getting into your college years and really developing your interests and your passions, what was the draw to math and science? Why was that such a pull for you?
um, math just really was something that was easy for me. And so it just sort of became a way of thinking. When I say math, in particular, like modeling. And so I was an applied math major in college. And so then I would just take that and apply it to whether it's economics, physics, chemistry, and even to, playing games, all that. And even applied it to dating in college, which turned out to be a mistake. So I was with a bunch of roommates, which we were all very diverse, different ethnic, religious backgrounds, but we shared one commonality that because we were all applied math majors, I think that inhibited our social life. It causes you to overthink versus just do things.
Yeah. And it seems like growing up, I mean, I don't know about you, but I overthought a lot of things growing up. So I can't imagine also having, this intense deep knowledge in applied mathematics and also bringing that to the
Yeah, that
table.
framework of building models and all that, applied to social settings is actually the worst thing to do.
so so when you were moving through college and you made the decision to go to law,
Mhm.
or to go into law rather, um, do you feel like that math and science background actually helped you be more creative, or help did that aid you to come differently to a problem, or to approach it in a different way, or was it just like you have this skill set, now you're adding another one?
Oh, I think once I learned the vocabulary of law and all the history and so forth, the applied math background was extremely helpful because it basically what it does is it's about how to build mathematical models, whether it's a mathematical model first of like chemistry or physics, and you apply it to law. And I actually am doing the same sort of concept and applying it to investing is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. But so in my case, once I have an understanding, like a framework of why things are going the way it is and sort of being able to predict what will happen, it just makes things easier.
I'm fascinated by that. And I was actually coming to this question. Um, but how do you apply these models, or at least that approach, that framework to investing? I mean, that to me is phenomenally fascinating, and I would love to hear your approach to that.
Sure. So the first thing is that so I'm a venture capital investor that invests in early stage, primarily software companies, B2B software companies, and so we invest in the company fairly early. Um, and the way we succeed is by the company succeeding and the price per share of the stock going up considerably. It's not like we get like consulting fees or anything else from the company. So we're really focused on shareholder wealth creation. That's how we're compensated. So the question then becomes is how do you take this really young startup that we invested in, or about to get started, and build it into a very successful company that has a lot of shareholder value? And it turns out that it has a lot of analogy to like raising a child. It's like giving birth to a child and then how to make it into a very successful adult. And so when it comes to building a startup, what we see is that startups go through 5 very different stages. First is finding product market. I mean, I'm sorry, is founding the company. where it's about selecting the right co-founders, building the right culture, the right vision, all that, the right founding team, basically. And that's critical because founder drama is what I see as the biggest cause of failure for any startup.
Really?
Yes.
Can you go into that a little bit more? Because that seems like a huge point.
Well, it's like when founders don't get along, and then it's like watching a divorce in action. And we, as the investors or the other employees, are like children sort of watching this divorce in real time, which is pretty painful for all of us. So, but if you have a very stable, hardworking, committed founder team, then even if the company fails the first time, they can keep working at it. And we've had several examples of where it's achieved great success, even though the first couple of times it failed, the first few years they struggled, and so forth. So having a really good founding team pays huge dividends, not just short term, but long term. And that's really the first stage is, how do you pick the right co-founders? So that's the first stage. The second stage for a B2B company is to find product market fit. And frankly, that's just coming out and having some happy customers. And so you want customers which are paying, which are passionate and are active users of your product, but fundamentally it means you've got some happy customers. Then the next thing is that what we see is that many companies then mistake from having, let's say, 10 happy customers and just say, by hiring a lot more sales reps, just by investing a lot more in sales and marketing, you can immediately go from 10 to 1,000 customers. Because you've got 10, they're really happy and exciting. So you should easily go from 10 to 1,000. You just hire some people, turn the crank, spend money, and you immediately scale. And what we found is that it doesn't work that way. Just because you have happy customers doesn't mean that you are ready for scale. Instead, after you find product market fit, it's also critical that you find what we call go-to-market fit. And that's a new term that we came up with. And what that is really unlocking the growth formula. So the first is having happy customers, but just because you have happy customers doesn't mean you can get a lot more of them. And so the second, the go-to-market fit then is about unlocking that growth formula, which we call go-to-market fit. And we've come out with a 3-step path on how to find go-to-market fit. And so once you have that growth formula, then you're really ready to scale. And so that's when you start scaling. And you have that growth formula from a financial perspective when you have like an Excel spreadsheet and you say, I invest X dollars in sales and marketing and I'll get Y dollars in new billings, and it works. Emotionally, the way it feels like is the difference between paddling and surfing. Paddling is so much energy you burn to go a fairly short distance. Whereas when you're surfing and you catch the wave, you can burn relatively little energy and you go far and you feel that momentum, you feel that wave behind you. And so
I love that analogy.
Yeah. So that's the real difference. That's when you can feel it, that you have go-to-market fit, is when you catch that wave. And then we then enter the 4th stage of the company journey, and that is, we say, accelerating the category leader. Because, in this new world with globalization, technology, all that, it's really become a winner-take-all world. In each category, there's one winner that sort of dominates. And so then it's about, you've caught the wave, that means others have caught the wave too, and others have seen you catch the wave, so they're jumping in. And so then how do you really own the wave, own and become the category leader? And that's like a $50 to $100 million company now. And then the last stage is, we say, is how do you transcend your category and become an industry leader of multiple categories? So we define it as a 5-step journey, and really focusing on this of how to find go-to-market fit, because that basically for us as investors is a distinction between companies that generally lose money and make money. So we're highly motivated to find and help companies cross that chasm.
Wow. So I'm so curious about this analogy. There were two that you used that I really want to dig into. And
Mhm.
by the way, I want to thank you for sharing that, because from the entrepreneur's perspective, to be able to understand, how you look at it, and being a very integral piece of that, and like hearing that's so valuable. So thank you for
And
sharing
what
that.
we're trying to do is we're trying to provide a framework. So if you have like a framework of how your life is going to change and be able to anticipate changes, it should help people in their careers and in their companies.
Exactly. So the first analogy I want to dig into is catching the wave versus paddling.
Mhm.
And what I'm really curious about is what that actually does feel like, because I can picture it logically in my head, but the idea of, okay, well, what does it actually feel like? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What is it? How does that actually manifest itself when you're running a company and building something? What does catching the wave look like? Because I feel like very, very few entrepreneurs ever really catch that wave. Most are just stuck in continuous paddling. So
Right.
how do you know that when you're in that sweet spot and you've caught the wave?
When you catch the wave, what you feel is this: you feel momentum. You feel like things are happening for you, even though you're not as like struggling as before. In particular, for B2B companies, the way you see it is you're just getting a lot of leads. You go from having struggling to get leads, calling friends for referrals, all that, and then all of a sudden leads are just pounding on your door. So that's what you see. Like in your case, as you're building, your community, you're working on getting more and more, like daily active users on your community, right? And you're trying this, you're working hard doing this, all these things. And, what happens, let's say something happens and there's something and you just go viral and the users just start growing exponentially. So
That's amazing.
what happens is that you want is how do you go from as we say paddling to surfing, and to go surfing you need to do three things. You need to catch the wave, as we're talking about, then be able to ride the wave, and then to have the right surfboard. So you need those three things, then with that you can really start surfing the wave and then on path to being a very successful company.
So is the idea to be positioning yourself, like constantly positioning, repositioning to try to catch the next wave? Or are you going after the same wave? Or does it just kind of happen randomly from the other steps in the framework? Like, how do you
Well,
actually catch it?
yeah, I think that's the key question is how do you catch a wave, right? And then later on, some companies have caught the wave and later on they have to recatch the next wave. So it's about how do you catch the wave? And to be honest, most of the companies that we see catch the wave, they do it out of luck.
Mm.
They worked hard at it, don't get me wrong, but part of it was just right place at the right time. And you can see that because they struggled to refine, recatch the wave later on for new products or as the company grows. So the way we think, I've what we've come up with is sort of how to catch the wave is to, identifying the wave is relatively easy. In terms of what's the next big thing, it could be like people talk about AR, it could be VR, it could be cloud, cyber. So there are a lot of waves that are coming. And what you can see is you see this wave and you'll see a picture of like four surfers, one who's caught it, three that are so close, but they didn't quite catch the wave. And so you see that with startups, that you see this wave, one catches it, the other three don't, even though they're just so close. And the main way I think to catch the wave is to identify the urgent pain. The urgent pain is simply answers the question for a customer, why buy now? Not 3 months from now, not 6 months from now, not a year from now, but why buy now? It's like in your case, it'll be like on your podcast, it's like if users feel like they have to listen right now, then you create that urgency and that need. So it's about identifying that urgent pain. And what makes it really hard is that the urgent pain many times is different from the founding idea.
Ah,
Because and the founding idea is important because that's why people quit their jobs, took this huge risk to start the company because they have this idea. This founding idea is to address a target pain point for a target set of customers. That's the essence in B2B of a founding idea. And so that's what the person is or the team is passionately focused on. And everyone says focus, focus, focus. So they're focused on this founding idea. But what customers really want today, I mean, a year from now, 5 years from now, they may want the founding idea, but they want today is different. So I'll give you an example. So of a company that I work closely with, Mobile Iron. It's a company that we helped, we incubated and built, and is now a public company. The founding idea was how to manage and secure heterogeneous smartphones. This is when we had Windows, we had Symbian, we had all these different, and the iPhone was coming out. And so the idea is how to make a great product that could manage and secure all these different types of smartphones. Sounds like a great vision. You can see the wave, smartphones are coming. It's going to be adopted by the enterprise. You have to manage and secure it. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that the urgent pain was simply managing and securing iPhones for executives. So within that broad wave of heterogeneous smartphones, all that, what people wanted was simply at that point, what was urgent was executives, especially CEOs, bought an iPhone for Christmas, brought it into work, told IT, I want to switch my BlackBerry to an iPhone to do my email, that kind of stuff. The IT department will say, well, we don't support iPhones, so you got to stick with your BlackBerry. And the CEO would say, well, that's an unacceptable answer. And so with that, IT had an urgent pain to making sure CEOs and other executives could work with their iPhones for email and that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean, by the way, that they were going to deploy this for all 50,000 or 100,000 employees, but there was that urgent pain to at least address the 50. And so the company pivoted to focus on this urgent pain. But at the end of the day, what makes it hard for the founders is that, in a way, it's like committing heresy. Right. Because, founding a company is such a passionate, such experience that you have this founding idea, and to go against your founding idea to something else is very tough to do.
It really seems like you have to almost take yourself out of the equation and almost get out of your own way and not be so focused on that, on that one tree or not be so focused on that one thing that you miss the wave or you miss the relevant right thing over here.
You have to be able to have empathy with customers. And so one thing that's really helpful is in these kind of early startups is that as the founder CEO, you're meeting with potential customers. You obviously pitch the founding idea because that's it. And what's good is don't spend 100% of the meeting on the founding idea. Spend 20 or 30% of the meeting then about the stuff around the founding idea and see what excites the potential customer.
That's interesting. So you're almost hedging your bet by giving them kind of like a choose your own adventure type of
Well, hedging, I use a different word. I would say cast a wider net,
mm,
because it could be that, I mean, in a way you're hedging, but really what you're trying to do is you have this founding idea and just cast a wider net as you get data back from the customers.
so
Because
you're
something adjacent could be what is the urgent pain. And
right.
so when you target the urgent pain, that's how you catch the wave. That's how you get the leads, because there's such an urgent pain, they have to take action.
Have you ever built a company that you just went straight to the customers and you're like, "Hey, what pain do you have?" And then you got their answers, and then you built the company around that and almost let the customer build or tell you what the need is directly?
We did something close to that. So what I found is that if you go with just a blank slate, like you described, you don't get very good feedback,
Mm, mhm,
because they don't really respect you,
right.
uh, and they think it's just a waste of time. If you go in with something that is really exciting, like it could be a great new technology like what AI is right now, or go in with something that really does look exciting and so forth, then they'll start giving you good feedback.
Hmm.
So one company that I was the founding CEO of, I'll give you an example, Airespace. Um, so the founding idea in that case was to have one wireless infrastructure in the enterprise that does both cellular and Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
You know, this was when Wi-Fi was starting to come out, and we thought, hey, you know, in the office, wouldn't it be nice to have one infrastructure so you have good Wi-Fi and you have good cellular coverage, right? It
Yeah.
sounds great. It would be, and so we architected and hired a team of 8 people, all this, and put this together and started talking with potential customers. And as we were talking to customers, what we realized is that all they want is Wi-Fi. They don't want the cellular as well. And
Ah,
the and it turns out the reason for it as well is that cellular is spectrum, which is owned by the carriers. So you can't really do anything unless the carriers approve it, because they own the spectrum, whereas Wi-Fi is based on open spectrum. And so anyone can do anything with it. And so as we would talk to customers and all that, we would get feedback that what they really wanted was enterprise grade Wi-Fi. And so we had to pivot the company, shrink it, and went from the founding idea I described, which is a grander, founding ideas are always grander than the urgent pain. But the urgent pain is what they buy today. So it really answers the question, you know, why buy today? Not 3 months from now, not a year from now, not 5 years from now, but today. And if you can answer that, um, then you're addressing an urgent pain. And that's the first step to catch the wave. I mean, you need to do other things to be able to ride the wave and have the right surfboard, but if you don't catch it, you don't begin the journey.
have you ever had a situation, and this is fascinating, by the way. Have you ever had a situation where you've pre-sold customers
Mhm.
to an idea? How did you structure that? Because if they're putting up their money now for the promise of something later, that there's a little bit of tension there inherent in that sort of arrangement. So how did you actually structure it?
Well, what happens is that you have to have a customer that has this urgent pain, and they can't go and buy it elsewhere right now. They really want this, but they can't go out and buy a product or get a consultant or someone to solve their urgent pain. And then they meet you, and you have some key technology or some team or something that the person believes that you makes you special. and believes that, by working with you, you will solve that urgent pain much faster than waiting for others. It really just comes down to that is, the severity of the urgent pain and the alternatives and confidence that you can solve it.
Wow. So it's about figuring out something that the pain is there. They have that extremely urgent pain and they need it today. And there's nothing that they can spend that money on right now or no good alternative.
Right.
And you have evidence to support the idea that you are the best potential bet they have to solve this pain as quickly as possible by investing in you early on.
Yes. Yes. As a development contract or pre-buying it, those are all different methods. But at the end of the day, there has to be the motivation.
Right. Right. So when it comes to this philosophy of identifying this urgent pain, it seems like you had to come to this conclusion somehow. And so I'm curious, like, when
Well,
did that?
well, that's why I say that the way to find the urgent pain, at the end of the day, urgent pain is not determined by you, me, the investors, or the board. It's determined by the customers, right?
Right.
And so the best way is you got to get data from the customers. And so by casting a wider net means that you're collecting data from the customers.
Well, I was curious about when you personally developed this ideology or this approach, because I'm sure there were some series of events that led to this.
Yes, too many failed investments. It's as simple as that. As I'm working on every investment or with founders or CEOs, since I was an applied math major, I mentioned, like to make models, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just sort of modeling and figuring out patterns of success and patterns of failure, whether it's on the company journey or the people journey, you know.
Wow. So on your own journey, and I ask this because I'm of the belief that every day we have to get better and we have to improve and we have to work on ourselves, and the extent to which we can achieve professionally is really capped by the extent to which we can grow as people.
Mhm.
So first of all, is that something that you subscribe to also? Um,
Absolutely.
and
That we have, especially because the world is so competitive as it becomes more global.
Absolutely. And so then my question is, how do you go about bettering yourself? How do you go about educating yourself and improving yourself? And how have you done it over time?
Right. So for me, it's a combination of three things. First, I really try to have an open mind and watch people, talk to people, learn from people, learn like what superpower each person may have and how they exercise that superpower. So really trying to observe and learn. The second is that it goes back to then the modeling is then I try to then figure out what is that sort of key pattern that I need to then apply, and then that comes down to then executing and just continually working on it. So I'll give you an example of something very specific. So as I mentioned, I being a Korean immigrant with parents that pushed you very hard in education, I did well in school and would do well in math and science and then in college, and then law. I was in law school. I started working, and I realized that there's a huge difference between doing well in school and tests and working, and that there's a fundamental skill that in working that's critical that was never taught to me, which is how to sell.
Mm.
When I say sell, it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be just selling like a hamburger or something, but it could be selling your vision, selling yourself. This whole idea of how to sell was something that was really never taught to me in a traditional sort of Asian style immigrant education. And it was something that I had to learn. And I would say learning it turned out to be extremely critical to, whatever I do. Because if you can't sell, then you can't persuade someone that this is the right thing to do. And so I can give you some examples of how I learned that, if you wish.
Yeah, yeah.
So first thing is by observing, right? So I was sharing an office with another. So we were both first-year attorneys, just came out of law school. I was 25. I looked like I was 16. And then the other person, he went to law school a little bit later. So he looked like he was about 35, even though he was about 30. And he just had this sort of confident demeanor. I mean, he just looked very mature and stately and so forth. So clients would meet both of us. And when clients met me, I think they all thought, what does this person know? And when the client met him, they go, oh, he looks like a partner, So immediately on first impression, I realized that, he had this huge advantage of clients because clients believed in him while clients did not believe in me. And so that was the thing, is I realized that he could gain that confidence. And so as a result succeeded, whereas in my case, because of just how I acted, my youth and everything, I created the exact opposite impression. And so the way it manifested itself is that I was working with this client at that time, probably about my age, but now, but I was 25, and we were negotiating this deal, and I said, this structure is not going to work. We should do it this way, not the traditional way, because of all these problems. And he looked at me and said, you're a young flake. You don't know what you're doing. Just shut up and take notes. And I could sort of say, he's paying for my legal time, right? So he's the client, I'm the attorney, and he's probably thinking, why did they send this junior attorney to work with me versus a partner or some senior associate? So I could see it, why he would be frustrated. But I was right. The structure didn't work, so the deal didn't happen. Okay. Similar kind of situation, but with a different client, but the same, expectation, all that. This time, what I did is, instead of sort of saying it's not going to work, I said, well, how do we handle this case? And he looked at it and he goes, that's a problem. And then you go, how do you handle this? So after about 20 minutes, the group is getting very frustrated because the normal way of doing things is not going to work, right? So they're now poised. They all feel very frustrated. And so at that point, I said, well, what if we do it this way? And they go, wow, you must be a boy genius. So I went from a young flake to a boy genius just on how I presented the proposal.
That's amazing.
How it's set it up and then present it.
So it seems like instead of trying to just deliver it, you waited for the right time and planted the seed. Yeah, you planted the seed.
Prepared for the answer is what I'm saying. It's because because of the fact that I look so young, acted so young, I couldn't just immediately exude that confidence, right? And have people believe me just because of the fact of my title or demeanor, whatever. So got the group prepared and desperate, and then presented.
That's brilliant. So that's the observe part.
And then applying it, learning it. I failed the first time. I keep testing it, and then ultimately figure out what works.
That's awesome. So now that you've been on this journey for for your whole life, and clearly this path has led you to where you are now, what questions do you still have about yourself?
Well, quite a lot, because it's about, as you pointed out, this quest for continual improvement. And so as the world is changing, how to improve, and frankly, how to still be relevant and useful and not obsolete. Because the way the world is changing, it's what works well today is going to fail tomorrow, and so forth. So it's a continual challenge.
So does that mean challenging your existing assumptions
Yes.
based on reading or talking to other people or working with mentors? Like, what's the actual tactical method that you use to challenge those beliefs? To first of all dig them up, because I don't think anybody really understands what their limiting beliefs are, or else we would know about them so they wouldn't be limiting beliefs.
Right, right. So I'd say the key is to talk and observe. It is talk to people in different parts of the world, different parts of community, and this is where in our firm, one core value we have is the importance of bridging diverse communities. So it's diversity by itself is nice, but it's not. But when you bridge diverse communities, the bridging is how you see the blind spots, how you see change, happening in different parts of the world with different technologies, all that. So you don't develop the myopia coming from just one place, in our case, like Silicon Valley, but otherwise you can just, it becomes like inside baseball and limiting. And then you become blindsided by something else happening somewhere else in the world.
So moving in the the industry and seeing all the things that you see on an everyday basis, where do you see the future of technology going? Where do you see in the next 50, 100, 500 years, where do you see us going from a technological perspective?
Technology is all about making humans better and providing entertainment. Is how I look at it. Fun and better is the two. Better is primarily more for the B2B side, and fun on the B2C side. And one area that I'm really fascinated by is augmented reality. And so by augmented reality, I mean something added to like my camera, like what Google Glass was an early version of, but we're in the future, so that I have the full power of technology and the internet right here as a display on my glass that I can see all the time. So you probably use LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine like you go to an event with your glass, and your glass can identify the people. And then in addition to seeing the person, you have their LinkedIn profile right below.
That's
So that
awesome.
would be an example of how technology becomes embedded with our human experience. And so just like, we went from personal computers to mobile computing, and now we do so much more with our smartphone than just our laptops. Imagine with AR glasses that becomes a new display and how we communicate with the network rather than just with a handheld device.
So I believe that the the law of nature of for every action there's an equal and
Mhm,
opposite reaction.
mhm,
Um, you know, I believe that happens a lot with progress.
mhm.
Um, for better for worse. What do you see as kind of the other side of as we're moving forward there and we're getting more connected to the network? What do you see as that equal and opposite reaction um, as a
So I,
result of that?
yeah, so I see two big challenges from a society standpoint. One is just the lack of confidentiality and privacy.
Mm,
So if everyone knows everyone else's genetic code and what diseases you may have, health issues, all that, then that would be that's going to become a huge problem. And then the second is the challenge of just AI becoming so good that how do you still make it beneficial for all of us as humans rather than just a few select people? Like in a way, China is using AI to build like a social score for every person in China.
Wow.
So it's a tool that could be misused as well as well used. So. Mhm.
That's fascinating. Well, I want to thank you very, very much, Tay, for your time and for sharing this time with me and discussing these things. So I'm very grateful. I want to be very respectful of your time. So I just have one more question for you.
Okay.
Then we can wrap it up.
Okay.
So from the perspective of a curious 24-year-old,
Mhm.
I would really like to know, what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Wow, that is a great question. Um, I would ask in whatever, if you're pursuing a journey like in tech and all that, is how can you find the right mentors to help you? Because it's so much easier if you learn from others and maybe save a mistake or two here than having it to learn everything yourself. And the natural temptation, at least with our kids around your age, is to do it themselves. So how to not get others to do the work, but how to build a network all around the world that can help you in your own journey. And I'm surprised by how helpful people are, even if they don't know each other and they're from all different parts. Because I think with technology and all that globalization, people do feel connected, and there's this great desire to sort of help others, like people have helped us.
Well, I think case in point is the fact that you would share your valuable time on the show.
Yeah, I
Um,
enjoyed it. This
so,
is very good.
so
Okay.
thank you very, very much. And to everybody who's watching and listening, I want to thank you all very, very much. The whole point of the show is to help you turn your dreams into reality. So, I hope you all really, really took in these lessons from Tay. There were some gems there. So if you didn't get all of them the first go round, I'd highly encourage you to go back a couple times and listen, because he's dropping a lot of knowledge there. So I'd highly encourage you all to do that. So thank you again, Tay. Thank you, everybody who's watching and listening. And I will see all of you on the very next episode. Take care now.